Good afternoon, class. You are welcome again, and we thank God for bringing all of us together again. Thank God for safety, and God will continue to keep us in Jesus' name. Good morning, class. We thank God for bringing us together again. Glory be to God. Good morning, class. We thank God for bringing us together again. Glory be to God. Good afternoon, class. We give God all the glory for bringing us together again after the lockdown. We thank God for safety. I will pray that God will continue to keep and protect every one of us and our family members in Jesus' name. We are going to take our class SCH 235 Loading Construction and Alteration. Loading Construction and Alteration. The topic we are going to consider now is clothing construction terms. Clothing construction terms. As we all know, we have terms in all that we do. We have terms. Even in food and nutrition, we have some terminologies that we need to use. So in clothing construction, we also have terms that we're supposed to be using when we are writing or when we are doing our construction. We have terms. Number one is block. Block. As we have already prepared our block patterns. 5 block patterns, basic block patterns, the front bodies, the back bodies, the front skirt, the back skirt block, and the sleeves. Now, block is referred to as a foundation pattern or a master plan, which can be made on paper or cardboard sheets. It is plain. It does not include any seam allowance. It doesn't include any seam. It does not include any hem or extra fullness. It's block. That's why we call it block. It's a basic pattern that we give birth to different types of patterns or styles. Then we have number 2, pattern. It is made when the blocks are outlined and adapted to the required style. So when you draft out your pattern, your style, then you are going to use the block pattern to adapt into the style that you have already drafted for yourself. So pattern is made when the blocks are outlined and adapted to the required style. Therefore, the 5 block patterns remain the same shape, but the shapes of the pattern pieces vary according to the style for which the pattern is being cut. So the style or your style will determine the type of pattern that you are going to make for that particular style. So the block patterns will now be used to make different patterns for different styles. Then we have something we call square out. Another term, square out or square across. This is drawing a line at straight angles. Drawing a line at straight angles. When you draw a line at straight angle on your pattern, you are squaring out or squaring across. We have another term that is referred to as fold out. Fold out, this is using that. Fold the pattern along one edge of the dart and place it to the other edge so that the dart no longer exists. I repeat, fold out means you fold the pattern along one edge of the dart and place it to the other edge so that the dart no longer exists. Half of the dart may also be folded out by placing the folded edge to the center point of the dart. We have another term that is called grain. We should be familiar with grain. Grain is the direction of the warp and the weft in a woven fabric. Grain is the direction of the warp and the weft in a woven fabric. We have warp, we have weft. Warp is the vertical lines that you find in your fabric. You also have weft, which is the horizontal line found in the fabric. Though you may not be able to see it with your naked eyes, if you open up a piece of fabric, if you view it through under a microscope, you will be able to see the lines, the one that is vertical, the one that is horizontal. That's the way it was being woven at the factory. So you have grain is the direction of the warp and the weft in a woven fabric. That is what we refer to as the grain of a fabric. So when you start drafting your pattern, when you see a pattern mark saying place on straight grain, that means you fold the fabric to the straight grain, that is to the warp of that particular fabric. So we can also refer to weft as cross grain because it is a horizontal line. The direction of the grain is horizontal on fabric, so we call it cross grain. So that brings us to what we call selvedge. Selvedge is the woven edge of the fabric that runs parallel to the lengthwise grain. The lengthwise grain is referred to as warp. So selvedge runs parallel to the lengthwise grain. It runs parallel. They are the finished edges that do not fray. It doesn't fray. You can't see the raw edge. Is what the Yoruba people refer to as eti aje, the thickest part of the fabric, the one that is very neat and thick. It does not fray. That's what is parallel to. It runs parallel to the lengthwise grain, that is the warp. The weft is the line of the fabric that is perpendicular to the selvedge of the fabric. The weft is perpendicular to the selvedge of the fabric. So you can see the warp and weft, they are referred to as the direction of the woven fabric, the lines on the woven fabric. Now we have what we call another term that is referred to as notions. Notions are the accessories we use in sewing. Accessories used in sewing projects. For example, you will have zip, thread, buttons, hook and eye, ribbons, and so on and so forth. They are all referred to as notions. So when we ask you to use notions for your garments, we are referring to all these accessories. Or if I say go and buy or get notions, you know that we are referring to accessories that we can use for sewing, like zip, thread, and so on, ribbons, and so on. Then we have what we call block. We have discussed what we call block. We have discussed what we call patterns. And you know that pattern is a template on a paper or cardboard from which all the pieces of the garments are traced onto fabric. So pattern is very important in the clothing construction. So is the major or the main term that we use in clothing construction. So we also have a term we call seam. Seam, when you start sewing, you see the line where the two pieces of fabric are held together by the thread is referred to as seam line. So when you are drafting your pattern, you have seam line, you also have seam allowance line. So the seam line, as we have seen we are still going to discuss that in the our pattern marks. So you have seam. Then you also have another term that is called seam allowance. This is the width of the fabric beyond the seam line. That is, you have seam line, then you have another one beyond it, which is referred to as seam allowance, the allowance that you use for sewing. If you sew on the seam line, that means there will be no allowance. That means the garment may be too tight for the wearer. So you need seam allowance. Then we have discussed the servage. So all these are the terms that we need when you are doing your construction, and even the ones you have done already and the one you are still going to do, you need all these terms. And for next class, we are going to discuss pattern marks. For next class, we are discussing pattern marks. So this brings us to the end of this particular class for today. We are going to if you have any question, you can send to me through this medium. Thank you.